University Motors. The other day I showed you this differential and how to change the shims behind the spider gears so you can get rid of the rear axle clunk. And I said simply, merely, pull the brake backing plate off the end of the axle and then pull the axle out. Well, Alan Vinegar from Toronto bugged me the other day and he said, well, John, pulling a rear axle out of the differential is extremely difficult if you don't know what you're doing. You have to have a slide hammer, put the slide hammer on the axle and ram and pop the thing out. What happens if you don't have a slide hammer? Well, it doesn't matter if you're in, we got police behind us here someplace. It doesn't matter if you're shopping at Canadian Tire or Napa or your local Ace Hardware. You can buy some threaded rod and make your own axle puller really easily. So let's go through this. On the outside of the axle is a nut, this 1 5/16 nut, which is held in place with a split pin. With a disc wheel, you can pull the split pin just easy schmeezy. But with a wire wheel differential, oh my gosh, you got to fish in there and get it out. It's just a bugger. What you can do instead simply is take that 1 5/16 socket, put it over the nut, drive it on with a hammer, and then just spin it off with an air gun, and that'll crack, that'll shear the split pin as it comes off. And then you can get the nut off. Usually after that, you simply pull on the hub, hit the hub with a hammer, and the hub just comes off. Sometimes this tapered washer has collapsed. You can see the split in the tapered washer. As this nut tightens up against this tapered washer, the washer collapses, and sometimes it can get really tight in there, and sometimes you've got to go in and hit this tapered washer with a prick punch, the hammer, make it come loose a little bit, but then still you can pull on this, just hit it with a hammer and it slips right off. So that's almost always the case. Now we've got a brake backing plate in place, and we've got this housing that holds the outside of the wheel bearing. So how do we get the rear axle out? Well, we take the bolts out here, and we take the bolts out, and then we put our hub back on, and we can put the well, easy for me to say, we can put the tapered washer back in just loosely, and we can put the nut on just loosely, tightened up just a bit, maybe in there just a little bit. Now, since these bolts are gone, and maybe you've pulled the brake backing plate off and that's dangling, now you're going to get two threaded rods, which I don't have, but I'm just going to talk about the threaded rods using these two big Phillips screwdrivers as an example. So we're going to put one threaded rod through here, through this hole, and we're going to put another threaded rod through this hole down here, or whatever hole we can find that's going to work. I've got jack stands in place here, and it's sort of screwing up my ability to show you because the jack stands are in place. But we put two threaded rods through here, double nut the end of the threaded rod so you can put a wrench on it and turn it, put a nut on this side and hold that nut with a wrench, turn this one, and the threaded rod is going to move out. As it moves out, it's going to bottom out on the hub, and as we continue to turn it, it's going to pull the hub and bearing out of the differential. So you don't need to use a hub puller. So it's a real easy technique. Threaded rod, a couple of nuts jammed against each other, a nut on this side, turn the threaded rod with a wrench holding this nut, the threaded rod moves ahead, and allow me to grab the axle shaft. The axle shaft will necessarily then be pulled out of the rear axle housing. There's an interference fit between the outside diameter of this rear wheel bearing which I love to tell everybody is the same rear wheel bearing as fits a 1950 MGTD. Anyway, this pulls out, and then you've got one axle out, and you can go ahead and do all the repairs on the inside of the differential, as I showed in that former video. So it's pretty straightforward. You can use a slide hammer if you want. That's what we had at the shop. It's faster, but it was a 5-pound slide hammer. To buy one of those from a value tool supply place is probably a couple $100. You can do this with $10 worth of threaded rod and nuts. So anyway, that's today's explanation of how to get the rear axle out of the tubed type GT or Salisbury differential. So until I'm on next time, safety fast.